80% of what you think about money comes from your limited experiences with money. I mean, your actual personal experiences with money, with investing, with interest rates, with the stock market probably make up less than 1/trillionth, not even 1/billionth of all the things that have happened regarding money in the history of the world. And yet you base about 80% of your viewpoint on money to what's happened to you, what's happened in your lifetime. First chapter of Morgan Housel's excellent book, The Psychology of Money, is called No One's Crazy. And in that chapter, he points out that based on when you grew up, someone who lived in the 20s versus the 30s versus the 40s, a lot of how you view money is going to be based on that. So if you lived in Germany during the Second World War, when the economy collapsed, you're going to have a different view, if that's when you were growing up, of the stock market and the economy than someone who's living in the US, where the market did incredibly well right before and after the war. And he goes through example after example after example of people who lived, for instance, during some of the decades where the stock market was just flat. They're scared to invest. Or people who lost a lot of money in the market never want to invest again. Other people maybe invested at a time right before the market went up, and it's kind of like, oh, this is so easy. I'm an incredible investor. I'm great at the stock market. About 80% of what we think about money is just based on what we know. So two people might have totally different views. Neither of them are crazy. They're both smart people, but they're both basing their experiences on what they know. One time, a reporter asked John F. Kennedy what he thought about the Depression and how had it affected him as a kid, and he gave a very honest answer to that reporter. Kennedy said this: "I have no firsthand knowledge of the Depression. My family had one of the great fortunes of the world, and it was worth more than ever. We had bigger houses, more servants, we traveled more. About the only thing that I saw directly was when my father hired some extra gardeners just to give them a job so that they could eat. I really did not learn about the Depression until I read about it at Harvard." One of the examples that Morgan Housel gives in the book that hard not to have a reaction when you read this, he talks about a New York Times article that went to one of the manufacturers, Foxconn, and they were manufacturing electronic parts, and there were all kinds of negative issues in the factory, and most people were saying, this is horrible. How could they have factories in these conditions? And one person from China in the comment section wrote in, and he wrote this: "My aunt worked several years in what Americans would call sweatshop. It was hard work, long hours, small wage, poor working conditions. Do you know what my aunt did before she worked in one of these factories? She was a prostitute. The idea of working in a sweatshop compared to that old lifestyle is an improvement in my opinion. I know that my aunt would rather be exploited by an evil capitalist boss for a couple dollars than have her body be exploited by multiple men for pennies. That's why I'm upset by many Americans thinking we do not have the same opportunities as the West. Our governmental infrastructure is different. The country is different. Yes, factory is hard labor. Could it be better? Yes, but only when you compare such a job to American jobs." And the author Morgan Housel says, "I don't know what to make of this. Part of me wants to argue fiercely, part of me wants to understand, but mostly it's an example of how different experiences can lead to vastly different views within topics that one side intuitively thinks should be black and white." So again, we come from a completely different perspective than someone who's grown up perhaps in a third world country or something like that. We often don't realize what we don't know. He gives the example of lottery tickets. He points out that the vast majority of people who buy lottery tickets are lower income people. They're hoping to make it rich. So they're spending a little bit of money here, a little bit there, which adds up to millions and millions of dollars. And he points out that the very wealthy almost never buy lottery tickets. And he said, for him, as someone who studies finances, it's easy to think, why would someone be crazy enough to buy a lottery ticket? That tends to be my viewpoint. I've never bought a lottery ticket before. I don't think I'll ever buy a lottery ticket in my life. But he explains, for someone who grows up without knowing things about finances, without that background, to them, a lottery ticket may seem like an escape. So it's easy to look and say, oh, they're foolish. They don't understand the numbers. They don't understand the math. The chances of winning the lottery are less likely than getting struck by lightning. But the person making that judgment call probably doesn't come from the same situation as that person who's buying the lottery ticket. He points out that the first form of currency we think was from around 600 BC. So some type of money has been around for a long, long time. And yet many of the things, he talks about before the world wars, you kind of worked until you weren't able to. And now we think about retirement. We think about our 401k. The 401k didn't exist until 1978. The Roth IRA did not exist until 1998, the year I was graduating from high school. So many things that a younger person, someone in their 20s or 30s, just thinks this is the way the world has always worked, are relatively new things in the history of the world. He has this quote that I really like because it touches on dogs. He says this: dogs were domesticated 10,000 years ago. I don't know if I would totally agree with his number there, and still retain some of the behaviors of their wild ancestors. Yet here we are with between 20 and 50 years of experience in the modern financial system, hoping to be perfectly acclimated. So I think one of the main points he's making in this chapter is give people a break, be long suffering with others. It's easy to think, oh, that was so foolish. Why did my relative do this? Why did that person I know do such and such? But nobody's crazy. We're just coming at it from different angles.